Ladies and gentlemen, this is where we're about to deep dive into a very special address around sustainability, maturity made achievable, a balanced approach to progress. And let's find out more on that as I invite on stage Vinamra Srivastava, Chief Sustainability and Sustainable Investments Officer, CapitaLand Investment. So if I could please invite on stage Vinamra Srivastava. Ladies and gentlemen, can we have an inspiring round of applause? Let's keep that momentum on.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It is a very hard act to follow, Minister. He was extremely eloquent and articulate. And I was thinking, what is it that I can cover in the next 7 minutes that's been allocated to me, which you haven't heard before today? And I thought a natural segue would actually be, after listening to the Minister on what countries like India are doing in their net zero journey, take a more micro approach and use our learnings to explain what private companies are doing and can do realistically on the ground towards the net zero journey. But before I start, I want a quick show of hands. How many of you feel achieving sustainability targets comes at a cost that is today not financially attractive to companies and shareholders? That's 20%, and I'm sure many of you are shy, but the real number will be much higher. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Vinamra. I head sustainability globally for CapitaLand Investments. CapitaLand is one of the largest real assets manager globally, managing more than $130 billion of assets under management. I'm based in Singapore, which is where our HQ is, and we are owned by Temasek, which is Singapore's sovereign fund. And with our efforts over 40 countries in managing our sustainability targets, we've learned a lot of lessons, and I hope that I can use the next few minutes to share some of those lessons with you, and I hope they can resonate with you. I'm not going to belabor this point, but the point of this slide is very simple. There are two things that's wrong with climate change today. One, that they are untimely, and two, that they can happen at any place. And as recent as last week, when we saw what happened with Hurricane Milton in US, is a perfect example of that. What are the other key things that we are seeing globally in the ESG space? On one hand, there are a lot of challenges, right? You will see that the number of litigations against private companies are on the rise, especially in the energy sector. You will also see that insurance costs are booming because of physical risks. Yesterday, my procurement team in the US told me that our latest insurance proposals for our assets in the US have increased 20% premium year on year just because of the one hurricane, right? We're also seeing turbulence in carbon offsets market. With everything that has been said about the role of carbon offsets, the carbon offsets market is in doldrums today globally. It has plummeted because of huge issues around integrity of carbon offsets. So they're not serving the role that they were supposed to serve at the moment. But there are also a lot of positive things happening. Many jurisdictions are increasingly making disclosures mandatory. And making disclosures mandatory is extremely important to make sure shareholders and other stakeholders have transparent information. And the other fantastic thing that's happening, that's on the bottom right, is today, across all the carbon pricing schemes globally, in totality, they cover 24% of global emissions, one way or the other. And this is excellent because unless you put a price to carbon, the world is not going to get to net zero. So in this context, we've looked at a lot of multinationals and looked through a lot of their sustainability strategies. And we see 4 common themes across all of them. The first one is a very clear decarbonization pathway between today and not 2050 net zero, because none of the people who make today's sustainability strategy, including myself, are going to be there in the hot seat in 2050. So you're going to kick the can down the road. So what's important in your decarbonization pathway is what are you going to do between today and whether it's 2019 or 2020 or whatever your baseline is and 2030. And articulate that through waterfalls that tell you, okay, today I'm here, 2030 I want to be here, this much is going to come from grid decarbonization. This much is going to come from renewable. This much is going to come from energy efficiency. For this last mile, I need to go and buy offsets. That is a decarbonization strategy. A decarbonization strategy is not to say, oh, I want to be net zero by 2050 and I'm doing as best as I can. It has to be quantitative. It has to be target driven. And the more I speak to investors in Europe and US, this is what I hear. They don't want to hear about my 2050 net zero targets. They want to hear what is my glide path between now and 2030. The second thing that we are seeing is equal impact on social integration, especially with your supply chain. And we cannot have a situation where we are dealing with trade-offs between environment goals and social goals. The third thing is turning decarbonization from a defensive problem to a business opportunity. So the more we can turn the problem on its head and start looking at new revenue lines and new businesses, that's fantastic. So if it means a real estate player like us venturing into infrastructure for renewable energy generation, then that's pivoting of your business model, right? Many conglomerates today are pivoting downwards on green hydrogen and using renewable as a step to do that. That's changing your business model. So how can you smartly do that? And the last bit that we see consistent is buy-in from organizations, and you need to build the right capability set within the organization. If your sustainability in your companies is being led by 4-people teams, I'm sorry, you're not going to meet your targets. It has to be driven by your business teams and not by your sustainability teams, right? If you look at what journeys companies go through in their sustainability maturity, we looked at many companies and we plotted this curve. And I would urge each one of you to look at this and check where you are or where your organization is in this journey. The purpose of this graph is very simple. If you want to meet your 2030 and 2050 net zero goals, first you need to know why you are doing this and where you are on this journey. Most companies globally start their sustainability journey because of compliance. Because regulations want this, therefore I have to do it. Because the regulators are asking me to disclose, therefore I have to do it. And there's nothing wrong with that. And there are many countries and companies who are at this stage. There's no right or wrong on this curve. These are just different stages that you go through. Then you evolve into saying this becomes a risk management tool. It impacts reputational risks, it impacts customer risks, and then that's where the board's risk committees start getting involved on linking sustainability to risk. The third step, and for me that third step is quite pivotal, is using sustainability to assess it as an operation excellence lever. Because now you realize, hey, you know what? I can save costs. Once you see sustainability improving operational efficiency, that's when it starts getting integrated into your commercials. The next step is really very few companies who are there, which are using ESG now as a tool for competitive advantage. Can I source capital cheaper? Can I source customers better? Today, as CapitaLand, we have around $16 billion of sustainable finance, either in terms of sustainable linked loans or in terms of green bonds or sustainable bonds. And the amount of interest rate savings that we get because of meeting sustainability targets gets funneled back into green investments. So if you are using this as a competitive edge, you're already on your way there. And the last is really where it's the purpose of your existence. And that's why you exist. It involves every decision. I dare say many companies are there yet, and that's perfectly fine. But it is important for you to map where you are on this journey. And it's important for you to do that because then you can tailor your initiatives accordingly. Because if you're early on this curve, there is no point for you to allocate millions of dollars to try to gain competitive advantage because of that. So, to conclude, what have been our learnings so far? 3 things. First, we realized that there is no silver bullet to net zero. And there's a term that I often use in Singapore when we have a lot of industry discussions, which is boring is beautiful. And the thinking behind this really is that often what makes headlines in newspapers is glitzy. I wish I can get nuclear fusion out of the way. I wish I can get pumped hydro as quickly as I can. The reality is, for 99.9% of the companies, those technologies are not going to materialize in the next 5 years for them on the ground. But what works are things that are not fantastic innovations, but things that are already working. So the problem is not to push for new innovations all the time at a corporate level. The problem is scaling up what already works. And that is where most companies falter. For most companies, at least in the hard-to-abate sectors of infrastructure, real estate, etc., getting your scope 1, scope 2 down is not rocket science. It's a question of how can you scale existing solutions in a commercially viable manner. So sometimes doing just the boring stuff, consistently, repeatedly, as MS Dhoni says, focus on the process, that's what moves the needle. The second thing we realize is having a portfolio view. If you are a manufacturer, or if you are a real estate owner, or if you're an infrastructure owner, not every asset is going to become net zero by 2050. Is your target net zero for each asset? Or each vehicle in your company? No. It's for your company to go to net zero. So focus on portfolio management. Getting to sustainability objectives is a question of portfolio management. I have limited capital in any company. I have limited green expenditure that I'm allocated as a budget every year. How best do I spend that $100 in a way that moves the needle? That money will generate far greater impact on some parts of my business and absolutely zero impact on other parts of the business. And you need to have that portfolio allocation mindset to be able to move the needle. And the third important thing is, it is not a zero-sum game. When I hear sustainability and financial returns as trade-offs, we're asking the wrong question. You need to look at this as a spectrum. On one end of the spectrum is us doing best for our planet, for our environment, and for society at any cost. And on the other end of the spectrum is a thinking that sustainability does not make money, and I'm accountable first and foremost to my shareholders. If any one of you are sitting on these two ends of the spectrum, I'm sorry, but you're mistaken. Because in reality, you slide on this path. There are times when you will err more on one side than the other. There'll be some things that make sense more financially, may not be so sustainability accretive, and you will decide not to do them, and vice versa. And we see this all the time in our global portfolio. Renewables in India today, I can get in many states as a commercial customer, renewable at less than 4 rupees a unit, whereas grid power is at 8 rupees a unit. It's a no-brainer. Why wouldn't I do that? But I take the same logic to many countries in Southeast Asia. The math does not work. I need to pay a 10-15% premium to get renewable access. Now, should I do that? That's debatable, right? Is that good for shareholders? Maybe not. But I don't need to fret about it, because at least there are markets where I can do this successfully. And the same goes for green investments as well. There are some markets where green investments will actually give me great returns. Same technology, I take it around the country, doesn't work. So we cannot say that achieving one versus the other is the approach. You have to really assess how do you balance the two. And there is also a time element to this. There are many things that may make sense from sustainability to do them later, not today. You may want to focus your capital on things that are working today and maybe allocate a small portion for future innovations. So the third point is, in a way, a bit linked to the second point as well. So our learning from all our experience has really been that financial attractiveness is possible, but you need to be holistic in your views. I'll give you a very small example. We are sitting in this hotel, right? What is the biggest carbon emission footprint of this hotel? Anyone? Sorry? Cooling. Aircon, right? The biggest. So if I go and change the chiller system of this building, the entire HVAC system, get it to the latest grade, for sure I'm going to get savings in emissions, right? But it's going to come at a huge cost, probably millions of dollars for a building like this. If I compare that cost only with the savings in utilities, I'm missing the picture. Because if I do that, my ROI is going to be probably 8-10 years and I will never make that decision. But if I start saying, hey, you know what, it's not the electricity cost savings. I'm going to have a carbon pricing, I'm going to have a carbon cost saving. It's going to impact my interest rates and I got savings there. It's going to allow me to get better customers who may actually pay me a premium for this product, right? It may allow me to lease the space much faster. So there are many elements which can give you financial attractiveness and returns, but you got to do this exercise asset by asset, investment by investment. I'm going to pause here, and I hope that this short learning will get us out of that mindset that there is a cost attached to everything that we do as a corporate. But if you're smart about allocating your capital and resources, there's lots we can do without being dependent on policies, without being dependent on what happens in the industry ecosystem. Just you on your own can do a lot. I'll just end by a saying that I'm always reminded of when it comes to who has the ownership and who can turn problems into opportunities. Has anyone of you heard of Robert Swan? Robert Swan was the first man to walk to both the poles, North Pole and the South Pole, and he's one of the greatest climate activists and speakers today. And he said that the greatest threat to our planet is the belief that someone else will save it. I hope we keep that thought in our minds. Thank you very much for your patience. Have a great evening together. I'm going to stay back because we have a short paper that we have just recently launched on green logistics, and I'll let you do the honors.
Thank you, Vinamra. In fact, thank you for sharing those important pillars of sustainability strategy as well with us. That being said, ladies and gentlemen, this afternoon we're also about to have the white paper launch around the topic, The Green Shift in India Logistics by Ascenda's First Space. So I'd like to also please invite, first up, Shashi Ray, Head ESG, Ascenda's First Space, to please come on stage. I'd like to further invite Nilesh Mashru, Head Leasing and Marketing, Ascenda's First Space. May I further please invite Eric Solheim, President Europe, Asia Center, sixth and former Executive Director in UN Environment, former Minister of Environment and International Development of Norway. And may I further please invite Sunita Quadros, the Chief Operating Officer, Time Strategic Solutions Limited. Let's have all of you please come on stage as we are about to launch the white paper on the green shift in India logistics. And we're about to do that in the more sustainable manner as well. We'll have it right up on the screen, the launch happening right up on the screen. So could we have the AV on the screen, please, team? All right, dignitaries on stage, I'm going to request you to take a look right behind as we have a soft launch over here of the white paper on the green shift in India logistics. We'll have one more photo up, but meanwhile I know everybody's phones are out, so let's have you quickly scan that QR code as well so that we can go ahead and download the white paper instantly. That way you'll actually get to deep dive into the insights of the white paper instantly. So please go ahead and do that before I request our dignitaries on the dais to come together for another photo op moment. All right, let's have you all come together as well meanwhile.